Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. After the recent deal between the Taliban and the United States, the next big question and the next big issue is the release of the Taliban prisoners by the Afghan government. This has been going on. Last week, we also saw push and pull on the issue of the release of the Taliban prisoners. President Ghani of Afghanistan, and also, by the way, there are now two men who are claiming presidential position in Afghanistan, President Ghani and also Abdullah Abdullah. So this will also be an issue that we'll be discussing. But before that, President Ghani has said that they can release 1,500 Taliban prisoners, but not more than that, though there are 5,000 prisoners. The rest of the prisoners would be released only if Taliban would be open to talks with the Ghani administration. Taliban have been calling it not a fair deal. They think that the 5,000 prisoners should be released, and after that, they can talk about settlement, political settlement with the Afghan government. The bigger issue at the moment is not that who is the president or who would be the president, let's say, or if this setup would continue. Many experts think the issue would be that who would deal with the Taliban. Also, we see that the last 10 days have also seen unprecedented violence as well in Afghanistan. There were several attacks by the Taliban. US forces have said that the attacks by the Taliban are reducing, but there is no denying the fact that still Taliban are carrying out attacks against the government forces, Afghan government forces in Afghanistan. Political settlement in Afghanistan, the intra-Afghan talks is also another big issue, another phase that we are going to discuss about in today's dialogue. This phase is very important for the intra-Afghan stability, for the Afghanistan stability, for its political future. How would different political factions, Abdullah Abdullah's faction, Ghani's faction, other many ethnic groups in Afghanistan, how would they work out on an agreement, on a government which should be inclusive and which can get rid of the violence that is going on at the moment? We're also going to discuss about Pakistan's role in the region, and Pakistan off and on has also recently signaled that Pakistan can also play a part in this intra-Afghan issue that is going on. Pakistan also helped in the past to bring Taliban to the table. Taliban visited many countries in the region. They also visited Islamabad for that matter. So this has been going on from the Pakistani side to support the intra-Afghan dialogue, because whatever happens in Afghanistan has direct and indirect impact on Pakistan. We're going to discuss about this, Pakistan's stance on Afghanistan, this war that has been going on, Afghanistan's future, with our special guest today. On Skype, we are joined by Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi, renowned senior defense analyst and an expert on regional security matters and Pakistan's security as well. Welcome to the show, General Lodhi. In the studios, we are joined by Dr. Jochen Hippler, renowned senior analyst, and he is the country director of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, a German foundation and international INGO working in Pakistan, based in Islamabad. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hippler. Second guest is Senator Marul Haq Kakar, renowned senior politician and a member of Senate's Committee on Foreign Affairs. Welcome to the show, Senator Kakar. I'll start with General Naeem Lodhi. This situation that is going on in Afghanistan, still we see the attacks are carried out by the Taliban. The security situation in Afghanistan, how do you see it? And this issue of the Taliban prisoner release, how do you see it?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing that we must remember is that a 19-year war cannot cool down and cannot unwind in 19 days. We'll have to give them at least 19 months. This is my assessment, or maybe something plus minus. As far as the situation in Afghanistan is concerned, I think because there has been written treaty between Americans and Afghan Taliban, so whatever hiccups are coming up, US would also like to resolve those issues, and other countries are also, like you mentioned, Pakistan. But let me give you a few facts. One is that as far as intra-Afghan dialogue is concerned, my understanding of this dialogue is not what is the understanding of Ashraf Ghani, that this means dialogue between Afghan government and Afghan Taliban. No, sir. It means dialogue between Afghan Taliban and all other stakeholders in Afghanistan, and there are many. There are Uzbeks, there are Hazaras, there are Turkmens, and you must be remembering that there were two dialogues held in Moscow quite some time back, where Afghan Taliban talked to a number of people. In one of the gathering, it was 100 representatives all from all over Afghanistan, Karzai being one of them, and there are women representatives also. So this intra-Afghan dialogue actually is going on for some time. And this misunderstanding of Ashraf Ghani that only once Taliban talk to him, that means intra-Afghan dialogue, I don't think as far as this thing is concerned. As far as security situation is concerned, I can give you a list of people who are enjoying in Afghanistan because of this turmoil, and they were carrying out their own interests. And on the line is, of course, RAW, Indian sponsored. Then is NDS, Ashraf Ghani. Then is Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan. Then is Daesh, IS, Khorasan, the gun runners, narcotic barons. Now, these groups which I've just listed, they would try their best not to get this status quo changed, because a turmoiled Afghanistan suits them, and I don't have to go into detail that why I say that. But and I'm not talking about Americans, because the American interests in this region and how will they achieve those interests, that we can have a separate talk. It will take some time. There are a number of groups, number of countries which are interested in peace in Afghanistan, and top of them, of course, Afghan people, Afghan Taliban, China, Pakistan, Russia, Central Asian countries, Iran. I think this group is stronger, and ultimately this is going to prevail. Of course, it will depend a lot that which side the Americans put their weight, and they are capable of putting their weight in either whatever, irrespective of whatever they say, they can put their weight with the detractors of peace, or they can put their weight with those who want peace in Afghanistan. That we can discuss later. So this is the overall situation.
Okay. Got your point, General Lodhi. Dr. Hipler, this issue of the Taliban release, how do you see it? Ashraf Ghani is not willing to release the 5,000 Taliban. Before that, we see that he was also not very happy with the way Americans were dealing with this whole Afghan issue. So much so with the Taliban even. This issue, how do you see it?
Well, I think you raise an important point. The point is now we hear lots of talk about the peace treaty, and I don't think it is, and I don't think it was. What we have here is a treaty between the American government and the Taliban, which provides American President Trump an excuse, a face-saving excuse for his withdrawing his troops. But Trump is not interested in Afghanistan at all. He's not interested in Pakistan. Trump is interested in himself, and he is interested of not losing the elections in November. And since his voters expect a troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, he tries to keep them happy, but he has not even coordinated properly with the Afghan government. He is discussing the future of Afghanistan, but he has excluded actually the Afghan government from any serious role in the negotiations. And the same thing applies to other countries. Britain, Germany, other countries have troops in Afghanistan, but they have not been involved in the discussion of troop withdrawal. So my point here really is that this is not a peace agreement. It is a face-saving chance for the President of the US to withdraw troops, which may be a first step at a later stage. That could lead to peace, but it's not that. So what I think is that when we talk about the Afghan war, we should just recognize it is not just one war, but it's a mixture of so many ones. In different provinces, in different districts, very different armed groups are fighting each other. And not all of them are Taliban. And sometimes they have no political but more economic interest or ethnic interest. So this is the reason why the foreign forces never have been able to win, because they didn't really understand the character of the war, and they still don't. So I hope this process will lead to a kind of process inside Afghanistan of reconciliation, but by itself it is definitely not a peace treaty.
Senator Kakar, do you agree with this? Because many experts think that this, you can call it withdrawal deal or a peace deal, was more sort of imposed on Afghanistan to expedite with the process. And as Dr. Hippler said, perhaps there was a need back in the United States to use this as a political mileage, by the Trump administration. But as we go on with this, this would require a lot of time, as General Lodi was saying. What is your take on this?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, if you observe last more or less of 2 decades, some now, according to some figures, some $2 trillion have been spent on this Afghan quagmire. I mean, no one really knew from day one what is the goalpost of this so-called war on terror. So, if you started from the October bombing of Afghanistan and from last few days, the goalposts have been changing from 1 month to another, from 1 year to another, and this imbroglio for whole Western Hemisphere led by the United States in terms of ISF and NATO troops, the realization was there that this military approach or this military strategy is not working. I mean, why we are saying it's not working? Because they were not being able to manage the violence. You can register 1 ton of reasons for that. There were no nation building, there was no institution building, because there was a lot of confusion. No one was ready to play that role. Were they there, those troops, to do the Afghan nation building, institutional building, bring peace, bring democracy? What was the goalpost? So that kind of a confusion probably has led to the presence for more or less of 2 decades. But now the realization has come that let's apply diplomacy and the political approach. And there are experts who are even saying that even diplomacy is not the answer to the Afghan question. And in a way, they are right. So what do you do? The solution appears to be that there has to be a way out. Initially, a way out for the withdrawal of the US troops and the rest of the ISF forces, which has started in Doha. I agree, it's not a peace deal. But yes, it is creating a conducive environment where they could give a chance. I hope this opportunity is not squandered, and Afghan themselves take benefit of this opportunity, because the message or echo which is coming, that the rest of the world is telling us and Afghans and everyone that ultimately it is for them to come and play a lead role for the peace in their own country and their own region. It is not primarily the responsibility of the rest of the world to bring peace to Kandahar or Kabul or Helmand or Uruzgan. It is the people of Uruzgan, people of Kandahar, people of Panjshir, people of Kabul who has to take up this responsibility. And if they fail their nation, if they fail their people, they have to be blamed.
Right. And this political schism, General Lodi, that we see in Afghanistan, legitimacy of the Kabul government is something that Ashraf Ghani has been, Dr. Ghani has been negotiating with the Taliban. They deny his legitimacy in Kabul. This prisoner's release, do you think would be used as a bargaining chip between the Ghani administration and the Taliban? And do you think that Taliban would now give that legitimacy to the Ghani administration, keeping in mind that Taliban have been calling Ghani administration as a puppet government, a government supported by United States? And would United States support this Kabul government?
There's a famous dictum of Napoleon which said that political power grows off the barrel of a gun. Probably it may not be applicable to the world at large today, but in Afghanistan it is very much valid. So the first thing to understand is that Ashraf Ghani is walking on very thin ice, because the 3 lakh or 3.5 lakh armed forces which he boasts about, very soon he will realize that how many of them they bolt and they join the ranks on the opposite side, I mean the Afghan Taliban. So Taliban, I don't think they will be in a hurry. In my own opinion, it is good for Ashraf Ghani if he voluntarily leaves these prisoners, otherwise they will be released in any case. It is just a matter of time, and how it will be done, I may not go into those details. The thing to understand is that Afghan Taliban, if they kept on fighting the mightiest forces on earth, and they forced them to withdraw, as our German friend is saying. So, what is the position of Ashraf Ghani and others as far as the Taliban are concerned? So, they are going to be the leading political power in any future dispensation, no doubts about it. So, I do not know. I didn't want to raise this point, but I fail to understand that why Pakistan Foreign Office and Pakistan government put their weight in Ashraf Ghani's government and congratulating him. Once there was a problem and there was a tug of war between the factions within Afghanistan, we should have remained neutral. We should have said that, okay, we expect that the brothers in Afghanistan, they solve their matters, and we will recognize the government whichever legitimately, ultimately comes to power. But they decided to put their weight on the side, which was also hosting people like Pashtun and Dawud. I fail to understand that anyway. I leave it to the wisdom of Foreign Office. There must be some pressure on them, and I am sure that pressure came from Americans, because we are very fond of, providing services without any benefits. Whatever is happening in Kashmir, they have not been able to ask Americans even to raise the curfew over there. So I have no doubts in my mind that ultimately there will be a political dispensation which will be led by Taliban. Of course, there will be others also in it. I have no problem in understanding that Taliban are talking to many people, except Ashraf Ghani. And Ashraf Ghani is not only Afghanistan. There are so many, factions as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Those who understand the history and geography of Afghanistan, they would understand it very well. So ultimately, Ashraf Ghani will have to give in. How that happens, when that happens, it is just a matter of time. And as I said earlier, it will all depend on how Americans behave as far as the deal is concerned, as far as the future is concerned. They are, for the time being, they are only interested in their own safe exit. And of course, as already discussed, that Trump wants to show something to the nation. They are not interested in peace in Afghanistan, I can tell you. And why should they be interested in any peace in Afghanistan? Because what they have been doing in the last 90, we keep on saying that they have gained nothing. I think they did gain 20 years. They did not allow China to have ingress in Afghanistan. They did not allow Russia to go to warm waters as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned. They did not allow Central Asian landlocked countries to go to the ocean. So they have achieved something in these 20 years, and they would like to keep this turmoil in one way or the other. This is my assessment. I can be wrong. But I feel that the group which now wants peace, they are stronger. And as Brother Kakar was saying, that we will have to facilitate. Of course, I understand that the ones will have to do it themselves. But the history shows that it is not very easy for them to do it themselves. So we will not take sides. But I think China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, they must make a consortium to help Afghans to resolve their issues. And if that happens, I think the peace will prevail. Of course, it will take some time.
Dr. Hipler, this legitimacy that the Ghani administration is looking for, in the past even, Ghani administration tried several times to negotiate with the Taliban. I can recall that at one point they were even asking Taliban to become a part of the negotiations, then they can give the Taliban passports and open their office in Afghanistan. So this legitimacy and legitimacy seeking from the Taliban, this would continue. How would Ghani administration deal with this?
Well, from the perspective of the Taliban, the situation looks quite good. They have fought for many years against foreign troops and Afghan troops, and by not losing, they politically have won. So from their perspective, I think that General Lodi is right. They just would want to wait. It's enough for them to wait. I remember 10 years ago, I was talking to General Stanley McChrystal, who then was the American and NATO commander of forces in Afghanistan. And General McChrystal told me the war in Afghanistan will not be won or lost by military means. We cannot win, but the Taliban can also not win. It will not be decisive. Secondly, the war in Afghanistan will not be decided by development. Okay. Development is important, as the military is important, but it will not decide the war. So I asked him, General, how will it be decided in your perspective? And He answered that it depends on whether we very, very quickly will manage to have a functioning and legitimate government in Afghanistan, which we do not have, said General McChrystal. And that is the core problem. I agreed with him. You know, these elections in Afghanistan, which were obviously manipulated from many sides, and nobody really knows what the result was. The split of the government in two, where we now have two presidents who want to represent, they again underline that the legitimacy of the whole government system is very weak. Not just in the countryside, where outside of the big city it was weak anyway, but now also in, you know, the political center, like in Kabul. That is the key problem, and I don't really see how we can have peace in Afghanistan without indeed getting a legitimate government which actually governs and functions very well. And this is something which is not being done by negotiations alone. It would require what also I think General Lodi said, different things in Afghanistan, and what the senator has said very well. I don't think this can be brought to Afghanistan from the outside. Getting a functioning system in Afghanistan can only be done by the inside, by the Afghans, but the outsiders, Europeans, Americans, Pakistanis, Russians, Saudis, they can contribute by not contributing to destroy Afghanistan more than they did. We all have had a very negative, destructive role by all outside forces, and this has to stop, but the job has to be done by the Afghans themselves and not by us.
Right. But Senator Kakar, you know the regional political fiber well, you know the tribal Pashtun political fiber well. This political legitimacy, let's say unity in Afghanistan, many people think that this would take time, and even in the past things have not been very pleasant, let's say, in Afghanistan politically when it comes to unity, let's say, or consensus for that matter. Do you think that it would come now, or this would continue, this fallout would continue? And what role can other countries play, let's say? We can play the role that what we have been playing, but how do you see the political situation over there?
I mean, to be honest with you, to begin with, first of all, we should get rid of our preconceived notions of legitimacy, acceptability, participatory government, and all these Western political democratic concepts. There are so-called two claimants of these legitimate governments, as we call it, or the rest of the world calls it. One is led by Mr. Abdullah Abdullah, and the next by Mr. Ashraf Ghani. For me, they are the two acceptable sides representing Afghan government. They are two factions, acceptable factions of the Afghan government. Forget about the question of legitimacy. Legitimacy is drawn by an accepted constitution. The third player which appears in their heyday, which is their finest hour, is Taliban. They don't even recognize this constitution and the whole process behind it, from where rest of us are drawing the so-called idea of legitimacy. So when the intra-Afghan dialogue begins, these are the key questions which they need to talk in an honest manner, that what sort of constitution is required by the Afghan state and society, what kind of history Afghanistan has. Are they looking for a strong central government? Are they looking for a decentralized sort of a structure where all the ethnic groups would be inclusive? Or kind of a presidential sort of a government, or a parliamentary form of a government? What sort of a democracy is acceptable to all the factions, women's rights, and so on and so forth. So there are many issues for which I even feel these 18 months are not enough. But it all needs to be discussed. It all needs to be brought into the public sphere, where the intra-Afghan dialogue should come first. The rest of the world, as my co-panelist, honorable co-panelist has suggested, no doubt we had a destructive, sometimes negative role. The rest of the world, it is not Pakistan alone, thank God, this time, who has to be blamed and made a scapegoat for everything wrong happening in Afghanistan. Pakistan is playing a very positive and constructive role and is being appreciated, I think so, at a global scale. We should only be facilitating this dialogue. Facilitating this dialogue and trying to cajole and persuade all the factions towards realism. And realism should be the key, that how peace and modus vivendi can be achieved within Afghan society, where it is beneficial to common Afghan, which is beneficial to the rest of the region, for the peace of Afghanistan, for the peace of region, and where Afghanistan can emerge as a responsible nation amongst the committee of nationhoods. Right. So that's why again I am emphasizing that it is for Afghan intelligentsia, it is for Afghan civil society, it is for Afghan women's right, it is for Taliban, it is for Ghani, it is for Abdullah, Hazara, Uzbek, Turkmen, anyone. They should come, own it, and shed away those checkered past which all of them carry, all of them carry, and once and for final solution. If they squander this historic opportunity, Afghanistan will be lost, and God forbid, I don't want to give a bad omen, the rest of Asia would be lost.
We'll continue our discussion on this issue of Afghanistan. We'll take a break, and after the break, we're going to discuss about the political cards that different political actors have been playing with in Afghanistan, and of course Pakistan's role in facilitating these talks and working for peace and stability in Afghanistan. After this break, stay with us. Wonderful. Great.
Passion for polo will be the highest on the world's highest polo ground. Shandur invites visitors to experience a traditional polo tournament between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The tournament is held on Shandur Pass, the highest polo ground in the world, at 3,700 meters above sea level. The first time a polo tournament took place on the Shandur Pass was in 1936. It is a place unique and exotic in itself, surrounded by some of the most spectacular mountain scenery in the world. The event marks the annual rivalry between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The polo tournament has some added attractions for the visitors: trout fishing at the nearby streams and lakes, and a festival of folk dances and music of northern Pakistan. The event in itself offers a fascinating insight into the lifestyle of the people of this region. Their culture and indigenous customs are a delight to behold for the visitors. Crystal clear lakes, snow-covered mountains, alpine flowers, and vast stretches of green grass are added attractions. Fairs and festivals of Pakistan.
You are watching PTV World.
Welcome back. We are discussing Afghanistan and the political situation in Afghanistan. I'll put this question to Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi. General Lodhi, recently there have been spoilers as well. Daesh is a main spoiler in Afghanistan. They have been carrying out attacks in Afghanistan. It's a threat to Pakistan. It's a threat to the region, Iran for that matter. How would the regional countries fight the spoilers, let's say, or counter the spoilers in Afghanistan? And recently there were attacks, as you know. First, how do you see Daesh or other spoilers, their role in Afghanistan?
You know, the first thing is that we must keep in mind that how these spoilers came and plonked themselves here in Afghanistan. Did they do it themselves or they were facilitated to do that? I will not go into the details. But the mere fact which I mentioned before also, that if Taliban, Afghan Taliban, can defeat such forces like America and NATO, okay, if not defeated, at least force them to review their aims of war, whatever. So these Daesh and such like forces will not be a big problem, provided Afghan Taliban are given a free hand and they're facilitated by all these neighbors, which are also very inimical to the presence of these groups. So I don't see any future of these groups in Afghanistan. The worst hit would be Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and of course that is the reason that you see some last-ditch efforts by them creating some trouble within Pakistan. Of course, the role of India will diminish, in my opinion. The Afghan NDS is likely to follow line of what the Taliban will dictate, or they will be cut to size. So these things will take some time, of course, because they are all fighters. But because at the present they are being supported by some forces within Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. I don't want to name them. Once that support is cut, both from outside and inside, it will be very difficult for these groups to stay put. But it brings me the baseline that what very openly said that they would not like China to expand in the region, they would not like Russia to expand in the region, these two powers, and if they don't want them to expand in this region, which means that Afghanistan should remain in some sort of turmoil or some sort of seesaw situation. So if that happens, if that is the objective of Americans, which I believe that it is, then it is going to take some time. But as Taliban have overcome very potent forces, I think in future, with the help of peace seekers, with the help of neighbors, they will overcome all these forces which you mentioned.
Right. But Dr. Hippler, Taliban cannot keep on using force against their, let's say, own people. They cannot keep on doing that forever. Taliban too have changed over the years. Do you agree with this idea? There's new generation within Taliban as well. Probably they would want to have better times in Afghanistan. Probably they would want to have different kind of society over there. Or do you think that this mentality continues, the same mentality that was back in, let's say, late 90s, or how do you see it, Taliban reacting to this whole development?
I think the Taliban are different Taliban than they have been before. You know, in the 1990s, they were basically illiterate rednecks who didn't know anything about the rest of the world outside of their province even, okay? And NATO and the US and all the other outsiders forced the Taliban to recognize the rest of the world. And they improved in the level of their education. They can read and write, they can plan. What they did in Qatar was quite professional, actually. So I don't think they have the same narrow-minded mentality, even if I don't agree with their political agenda. They are very different. But for us, the key point to understand is that I still think the war will not be decided by military force, by nobody's military force. If military force could decide such a war, the American would have won militarily. You know, they had unlimited financial means. They had all the technology, they had air force, they have drones, they have satellites, they had 140,000 foreign soldiers, plus all the Afghans. Still, they couldn't win against 35,000 illiterate, bearded guys with Kalashnikovs, right? Because this is not a military war. The military force is just a tactical means to get political effects. And this the Americans never understood, and that's the reason they managed. The Taliban didn't win the war, the Americans lost it. And they lost it politically and not militarily. And I think that hasn't changed. Just remember when President Najibullah was in Afghanistan. He won the Battle of Jalalabad in 1992. Basically, his government was now dominating over the Mujahideen, right, after the Soviet withdrawal. Still, his government disintegrated for political and economic reasons. You know, Dostum went away, everybody went their own ways. So the Najibullah government was never militarily beaten, but still it lost politically. And that is the question of the future of Afghanistan. Yeah. Will it be possible to integrate a political system which is credible in the country or in most of the country, then whether the Taliban fight or not doesn't matter very much. But if the government will also disintegrate like Najibullah's did, or if it's not getting legitimacy, then the Taliban will win, no matter what kinds of means they take. So I think it's not a military war, it's a political war where military force and terrorism and violence uses a tactical tool, but it's not decisive.
So, two different trends that we see, Senator Kakar, in Afghanistan. One is that the way Ashraf Ghani administration is using at times ethnic cards as well politically. We see the Taliban cannot continue with the force, let's say, with the same old ideas. There's a new generation within Afghanistan and also new middle class, new generation in Kabul and elsewhere, you know, in north of Afghanistan and the center of Afghanistan, unlike what is happening, let's say, in the south. These two forces, how would they collide? How would they talk to each other and work for the betterment? Two opposing ideas.
I mean, to be honest with you, it's not even now about two opposing ideas. The ideas are converging. And what is the idea? The idea is everyone is claiming at least that they want a peaceful Afghanistan. And the questions, the political questions that who would be heading the legitimate government, those mechanisms, they need to be discussed by these different groups. As far as specifically Mr. Ashraf Ghani is concerned, I think so he's just trying to put some leverage to keep himself politically relevant. And Doctor has rightly identified the analogy between the then Najib government and present day Ashraf Ghani government. There are a lot of similarities. For instance, we have an Afghan National Army now. Who would pay the checks for Afghan National Army would decide the future of this group. Would the international community continue to build that $4 to $5 billion spending of Afghan defense forces, which would enable Ashraf Ghani and the rest to become an acceptable faction or a group to talk to the rest of the groups? That leverage would remain primarily with the US and rest of the Western world. Right. So in my opinion, again, they have to shun away those preconceived ideas, and they have to give in some space, all of them, to bring Afghanistan to a degree of peace and to a degree of governance where more or less the major groups, they get participation, they get representation, and some sort of a constitutional mechanism has to be agreed. And I am very clear on one thing, that the present constitution is not providing all those answers, because this constitution itself is being considered as an imposed document. The prime resistance from the Taliban faction was that they resisted the physical occupancy of these forces. So how could they accept the constitutional and the ideological occupancy of the same forces? Right. So they have to talk to each other that what are the acceptable norms, political and constitutional norms, where the rest of the Afghan society has to be governed. Some principles have to be agreed by them, and those principles can be facilitated. Again, I would reiterate the position of the region and global players who do not have agenda or the vested interest for themselves. This time it has to be for the Afghan people. Let them give a chance, let region have a chance to enjoy peace. They have suffered a lot for last 4 or 5 decades.
Right. General Lodi, Ghani administration, Ashraf Ghani, Dr. Ashraf Ghani himself has not been very happy with the way Americans have been dealing with the Taliban. He's not very happy with Pakistan for that matter. The blame game has been there. He's not okay with Abdullah for that matter. How is he going to continue dealing with the Taliban? And also keeping in mind that the reports are that he refused to receive Zalmay Khalilzad twice. What do you make of it?
As I said earlier, that he's walking on thin ice, so I can only reiterate that. You see, he's also representing the, you can say, the Pashtuns of mainly of Afghanistan, and main supporters of Taliban are also Pashtuns, although now they have included all the factions. That is a good thing about Taliban. Whereas Taliban must have changed, as my friends were saying. But two things will not change. One is the geography of Afghanistan, which is fragmented, which has got mountain ranges and rivers which bifurcate various regions. And of course, the history will not change, where you have central government which is not very strong. There's a loose control over the provinces, and normally the tribes and various areas which are under Hazaras or Uzbeks or Turkmen, they have their own small governments, and this is how Afghanistan has been running in the annals of history, and also because of the geographical things. So, in my opinion, I don't want to say that, but Ashraf Ghani is just fighting a lost war. And earlier he understands, the better for him. I don't know why he's under this aura of power which he doesn't actually wield. Because if Americans have abandoned him, nobody else is on his side. So I think not earlier, sometime later, he will understand his actual position. And I don't think I cannot see Ashraf Ghani in any future dispensation in Afghanistan. He will have to leave, and this I say with a heavy heart.
Dr. Hepler, my last question briefly, what should Pakistan and Afghanistan at the moment should focus on in order to improve relations and keep a check on the spoilers that are there in the region?
Well, from the Afghan side, I think recognizing the Durand line would be a good idea. From the Pakistan, recognizing the destructive role the country has played in Afghanistan in the past would probably be a symbol of now better cooperation. And then just jointly trying to deal with the problems on hand might make meaning that, trying to have a peace process which hasn't started. And I think Pakistan could probably be encouraging in this regard if some of the baggage of the past are out of the way.
Right. Senator Kakar, concluding remarks. As General Lodi said, Foreign Office gave this statement, Pakistan and other countries, US for that matter. What should be done in order to improve our relations and for confidence building measures, let's say, that should be taken with the society, Afghan society?
Well, to be honest with you, for last 5 decades, Pakistan has been a hospitable country to the longest presence of refugees on globe anywhere. This is one thing where I think so we should have a very comprehensive policy towards 5 million Afghan people who are residing on Pakistani soil. We have not come up with a policy. We need a policy, and that policy should be pro-people. And once I think so we have that, and Pakistani state and government announces that, that would be the biggest symbol and gesture towards future of Afghanistan, and people-to-people contact would depend a lot on that policy of Pakistan.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Dr. Hepler, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. Senator Kakar, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Lieutenant General Naeem Lodi. Pleasure having you on the show. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.